Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. The European Union is rebuking Ukraine and warning the country of its EU accession obligations over a new law that brings the Independent Anti-Corruption Bureau under state control. More on that in just a moment. Ukraine's security services, as I mentioned there, have arrested officials from the country's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, known as the NABU, amid suspected collusion with Russian moles. Lawmakers then passed a new bill today to effectively end the Bureau's independence. That's prompted concern from some Ukrainians and the European Union, which says independent bodies like NABU are crucial for Kyiv's EU path. Natalia Komarov reports.
A Russian mole in Ukraine's biggest anti-corruption bureau?
Security services, together with the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, have discovered an FSB cell which infiltrated the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine.
On Monday, Ukraine's security service SBU conducted over 70 raids on the bureau's offices across the country and detained 2 NABU detectives. SBU alleges one of them provided intel to close collaborators of exiled former President Viktor Yanukovych, and the other facilitated illegal sales of industry-grade cannabis in Dagestan. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine was established in 2014 under pressure from Kyiv's Western partners. It was required by the IMF and the European Commission to ease visa restrictions for Ukrainian citizens.
The whole idea was, after revolution in 2014, was to create independent anti-corruption bodies system which will fight against corruption in our country. I can't say that this system worked perfectly, no, but there were some successes, and there was a feeling that this system is quite independent.
After the raids, the Anti-Corruption Bureau released a statement accusing the security service of conducting searches without warrants, using its power to access sensitive information pertaining to NABU's ongoing investigations, and even using physical force against one of its detectives. What is more, on Tuesday, the Ukrainian parliament passed controversial legislation which would give control of anti-corruption bodies like NABU to the National Prosecution. NABU says the move will effectively destroy Ukraine's anti-corruption infrastructure, developed in cooperation with international partners.
Critics of this decision point out that it destroys the independence of anti-corruption bodies. And those who defend this decision say that this is, in principle, a decision that allows including all these bodies in the general system.
While the development sparked international concern, the United States might have a positive approach to the new bill.
Relations with the U.S. are important to us now, and in fact, in many cases, these anti-corruption bodies were associated with the Democrats. And many Republicans say, well, Ukraine is a kind of patrimony of Democrats, where Democrats rule everything and so on. So I assume that the Trump administration may not condemn, but on the contrary, approve of this decision.
Meanwhile, the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, called the vote a serious step back.
Seriously concerned over today's vote in the Rada, the dismantling of key safeguards protecting NABU's independence is a serious step back. Independent bodies like NABU and SAPO are essential for Ukraine's EU path. Rule of law remains in the very center of EU accession negotiations.
While many Ukrainians loudly condemn the crackdown on independent anti-corruption bodies, it remains to be seen whether President Zelenskyy will sign the contentious bill. If he does, though, it is certain to cause a major rift between Kyiv and the European Union, as the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine was established to further Kyiv's European path. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
And this is a developing story. So joining me live now from Brussels for more reaction is our correspondent, Alex Cadier. Good evening, Alex. How is this story playing out where you are?
Good evening, Aaron. Well, it is seen in Brussels as something that flies completely in the face of the promises that Ukraine has made to its European partners, which have been so generously supporting that country in the face of Russia's full-scale invasion. Clearly, this is something that has drawn a lot of criticism in Brussels. I went to the European Commission to ask the EU's executive exactly that. What is your reaction? I asked the spokesperson there, Guillaume Mercier. This is what he had to say.
The European Union is concerned about Ukraine's recent action with regard to its anti-corruption institutions, namely the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. These institutions are crucial to Ukraine's reform agenda and must operate in an independent way to fight corruption and maintain public trust. The EU provides significant financial assistance to Ukraine, conditional on progress in transparency, judicial reform and democratic governance. Ukraine's accession will require a strong capacity to combat corruption and to ensure institutional resilience. The EU will continue to monitor the situation and support Ukraine in upholding the rule of law.
So, Aaron, clearly they're behind a lot of the Brussels speak. That is about as strong, stinging a rebuke as you can imagine from Brussels on this subject. That crucial line saying the EU provides significant financial assistance to Ukraine, but that relies on Ukraine making progress on its rule of law reforms, on its democratic reforms. Brussels sees this move very clearly as moving in the wrong direction. The Commission stopping short of a threat, but clearly Brussels, diplomats around the world, deeply concerned about this move, Aaron.
Something to watch over the coming days. Alex Carrier in Brussels, thank you. Staying with Ukraine now, and Kyiv is gearing up for a third round of direct peace talks with Moscow. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy pitched the meeting earlier this week, just days after Washington threatened severe sanctions if Russia did not strike a ceasefire deal by early September. Both sides will now gather in Istanbul on Wednesday, but a potential sit-down between Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin will have to wait. John Todd explains.
Final preparations underway in Istanbul ahead of further peace talks tomorrow. They follow two earlier rounds. Russia's warning, though, don't expect a miracle on Wednesday. A Ukrainian official said talks may focus on further prisoner exchanges and a potential meeting between Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin. In Ukraine, firefighters battle flames after another deadly Russian airstrike. President Zelenskyy is prioritizing protection from drone and missile attacks.
We are acquiring everything that can protect our cities and our frontline positions from Shahed drones. This is also a task for Ukrainian diplomats.
His comments come after warnings that Russia could be preparing to target Ukraine with up to 2,000 drones a night. Experts say Ukraine could defend itself, but would need help.
Well, they have the capacity, but they need to get the equipment in place, and it's not there yet. The way that the Ukrainians deal with these drones is through a layered defense that goes down to groups of guys on pickup trucks.
The new Prime Minister, Yulia Sviridenko, told Bloomberg she'll seek more support from the International Monetary Fund to shore up the country's finances.
If the baseline scenario assumes the war will continue into next year, it is very likely we will have a new IMF program.
Sviridenko will also speak with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, with whom she inked the US-Ukraine minerals deal. Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal estimates Ukraine will need at least $120 billion for defense spending next year. On Monday, NATO and EU members from the Ukraine Contact Group met to discuss the supply of weapons worth $60 billion. Germany has rallied to protect Ukraine with Patriots as Berlin discusses replacements for missile systems that will be sent to the war-torn country.
You did a great job.
Under the deal between NATO and the US, European alliance members will fund arms sent to Kyiv. Experts say the 50-day deadline issued by President Donald Trump is being used by President Vladimir Putin to apply more pressure on Ukraine.
Clearly, the tactic is to both show the West that they cannot really influence Moscow, that Moscow will do as it pleases, that Moscow is going for broke, that is all or nothing, give us the maximum that we demand.
Putin has so far resisted calls for a ceasefire, but the clock is ticking on Trump's threat to ramp up sanctions on Russia. John Todd for TVP World.
Europeans need a feeling of control over their borders. That's the message from the EU's Migration Commissioner, who says return hubs are one part of the solution. Our correspondent Angela Skujins has more.
Tightening the screws on the EU's migration and asylum systems is now firmly within the headlights of the European Commission, as many disaffected governments from across the 27 EU member states want change. Now, what they're trumpeting are innovative solutions, the key solution here being the establishment of a returns hub. Now, we heard from the European Commissioner for Migration, Magnus Brunner, talk up these return hubs, which are currently already operational. There are two operating in Albania under the auspices of the Italian government. We also know the UK government tried to set up a similar system in Rwanda before that was scuppered by the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Now, while there is controversy surrounding these return hubs, we do know that there is political appetite to secure more. Let's take a listen to what the EU Commissioner for Migration, Magnus Brunner, had to say about what this represents, this political vibe shift occurring across the bloc.
There has been a shift. Fortunately, there has been a shift, and Europe is taking a different approach now than maybe years before. I don't know. I wasn't involved there, but I can just tell you that now most member states, all member states, are aligned.
Now, the comments from Brunner came after he ascended Germany's tallest peak on Friday with leaders from across 6 Central European countries. Now, they all agreed upon 6 new asylum and migration pillars, with Brussels now tasked with removing the legislative barriers that would prevent them from operating. Now, former Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz told TVP World that a huge problem facing the bloc are its external borders. However, he sounded buoyed by this change of tune.
Thanks God, positions within the European Union have changed. And when I was foreign minister in the year 2015 and the migration crisis started, I was criticized every single day. To be honest, I think that my positions were not far right or right wing. They were just normal positions, because from my perspective, it's impossible for a European Union without borders internally to have no external borders.
Shoring up the EU's external borders is just one of 4 pillars behind their method of revolutionising migration and asylum rules. This is the Migration and Asylum Pact, with the 27 EU member states required to implement this policy starting from June next year. Our sources tell us that only 2 member states have not submitted their plans just yet. This includes Poland and Hungary. But what we know of this plan is that it aims to share the burden of the migrants entering the EU while also establishing a proficient return system so they can leave. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
And for the full exclusive interview with former Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz, stay tuned for On the Record with Adam Yasser on Wednesday night at 8:30 Central European Time. The clock is counting down to a major summit between Beijing and Brussels. European officials will arrive in China later this week, including Ursula von der Leyen and António Costa, to mark 50 years of diplomatic relations. But while the pair appear to have locked in face time with China's President Xi Jinping, any deals are unlikely, with strained ties and trade turbulence in the spotlight. Here's EU correspondent Alex Carrier again with this next report.
The EU-China relationship has always been a little awkward. The two economic giants are divided on some burning issues, but they do need to work together. The European Union is China's second largest export market after the US, and with its own economy growing less quickly than expected, Chinese companies really need to ship their products elsewhere. The EU's dynamic duo, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Council President António Costa, will have a lot of ground to cover. First on the menu will be the EU's whopping €300 billion trade deficit with China. Big European companies have long said that although China gets to sell its goods freely in the EU, access to the Chinese market for EU firms has been at best restricted, at worst impossible. Germany wants China to open the door to more of its car makers. As for the French, well, they'd quite like to see more Chinese people buying French luxury goods, French wine, and even French beauty products. But von der Leyen and Costa will also need to take note of the fact that not everyone in Europe shares the same eagerness to trade with China.
I should say that the contradiction runs through almost all EU countries. If you look at the upsurge in Chinese exports to the EU, the countries where it has risen most in recent months are precisely Eastern European countries, including Baltic states. Their commercial or economic dealings are quite separate from the strategic issues, and that is probably valid for the whole Union.
For Central Eastern European and Baltic countries, China is seen as a threat rather than a tricky but necessary trading partner, particularly because of Beijing's support for Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. One exception, of course, Hungary, which continues to expand its relationship with Beijing and Moscow, turning its back to European neighbours. So with divisions in Europe, an uncooperative, if not belligerent China, I asked the European Commission what expectations it has for this summit.
Which will be an opportunity for the leaders to discuss important topics, that the bilateral relationship between the European Union and China in all its aspects, including trade, including investment, including climate, energy, environment, digital matters, and global geopolitical issues. So, important summit.
An opportunity to discuss, but not to make any deals, not to make any progress. There is a lot at stake here. There is thousands of jobs on the line, the geopolitical stability of the world, the war in Ukraine, Taiwan, global climate change. And yet, for now, this summit will be very high stakes, but very low expectations. In Brussels, I'm Alex Cadier for TVP World.
A likely promotion for Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. The country's top diplomat is set to be appointed Deputy Prime Minister in a government reshuffle on Wednesday morning. It comes as Prime Minister Donald Tusk's centrist coalition continues to deal with the fallout from a surprise presidential election loss last month. Marek Steele reports.
And finally, the full shape of the Polish government reshuffle will be announced on Wednesday morning.
This will be a completely new cabinet, simply.
The new Polish government will consist of the same parties and have the same prime minister, but one of the changes may include a new deputy PM. Radosław Sikorski, Poland's popular foreign minister, could be bumped up to Donald Tusk's deputy, while maintaining his current position.
Minister Sikorski is a very good foreign minister and has the full credentials to become deputy prime minister in the Polish government.
Sikorski has recently topped a poll of confidence in Polish politicians. He passed all of them, including President-elect Karol Nawrocki, Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, and outgoing President Andrzej Duda.
There have been several positions that Radosław Sikorski has been looking at, whether it's the EU Commissioner for Defense role or others that he's looked at. I think that he has a great ambition, and that's a really positive thing to see in a politician.
But Sikorski's new role is not the only likely change in the government in Warsaw. Another important reform will concern the economy.
Well, the government would like to streamline the management of the economy by creating two economic super ministries. The first one, it will be the Ministry of Economy, and it's going to be headed by the current finance minister, Andrzej Domański. And the second one will be the Ministry of Energy, because Poland is currently undertaking a massive energy transformation.
The victory of Karol Nawrocki, supported by the National Conservative opposition in June's presidential runoff, spoiled the ruling coalition's plans for deep reforms, due to the veto power the president holds in Poland, but the government insists that the changes were inevitable.
From the very beginning, it was clear, and the Prime Minister has spoken about this, that following the presidential election, regardless of its outcome, there would be time for auditing and change.
Experts seem to agree that in the current state of affairs, the reshuffle itself is not going to be the breakthrough that the government in Warsaw needs.
Whether it's a new deputy prime minister from this or that ministry, whether it's a combination and a streamlining of ministries, what this government, what the Donald Tusk government actually needs is a strategy going forward and a vision. So I hope that with the reshuffle comes that sort of strategy.
Tusk's government will have 2 more years to convince Poles to support his government again. For TVP World, I'm Marek Steele.
Hundreds of Poles have walked the streets of Warsaw to honour the memory of Jews murdered by Nazi Germany during World War II. Known as the March of Memory, the commemoration is held annually on the anniversary of the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. Our correspondent Kazimierz Słyszak joined the march and is with me now. Good evening, Kazimierz. How important is this event for Polish people?
Good evening, Aaron. This event is very important to not only the residents of Warsaw, but from Poles from all over the country. And the atmosphere here during this march today was very solemn, as you can imagine, from an event, from a commemoration of such a tragic event. Some 300,000 Jews were taken from the Warsaw Ghetto on July 22nd, 1942, to a death camp in Treblinka and killed in gas chambers. 300,000 people. Just to give you the sense of scale, if you take the US Stadium of Madison Square Garden and fill it to the brink with people, multiply that by 15. That's how many people were killed in the span of just 2 months. That's about 5,000 people killed per day. So such tragic events require special commemorations, and this one was no different. Let's listen to some of the participants of the march with whom I spoke earlier today.
I think it's important to be here because we should remember things from the past, take lessons from the past, especially today when no good thing happens in Poland, I think.
I think we need to memorize that because if we see that currently in our world it is still a lot of anxiety and hate, so we need to remember that.
Now, every year the march has a theme, and this year's theme was musicians, artists who helped the Jews during that very difficult time, that gave them some solace. And the organizers of the march, the Jewish Historical Institute, gave all the participants bags such as these with faces of some of these artists on them, and their songs are being performed right now in the park next to us. I've spoken with one of the organizers from the Institute earlier today. Let's listen to what she had to say.
This year, the march is dedicated to the musicians of the Warsaw Ghetto, a very big and very significant group of people that created culture, that performed in the Warsaw Ghetto, and somehow they also gave people that lived in the ghetto, that were close in the ghetto, they gave them moments of gaining some kind of humanity, and also to forget about the tragic reality that was surrounding them.
Now, you may be wondering where we are right now. What is this fence and what are these ribbons? I have one right here. They were included in these bags and they have names on them. These are the names of some of the Jews that were killed by the Nazi Germans, like Leib right here. So let me add our small part to this commemoration. And that's one of the ways that Warsaw remembers its past. Back to you in the studio, Aaron.
Kazimierz Wyszek reporting there from Warsaw. Thank you. And that's all for this shorter edition of World News Tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.